This is the Rise of the East podcast. I am your host, Joel Francis, and this is episode 8, Peace and Conflict. Who could have imagined that in 85 BC, that was only the first of 3 wars that would last a lifetime? Mithridates sailed back to Pontus, while Sulla mopped up. Fimbria was still on the loose. He needed to be stopped. The two armies encamped next to each other. Sulla ordered his men to dig trenches. And Fimbria's men? Well, they went over and helped Sulla's troops. Fimbria's army went over to Sulla's. Fimbria killed himself in the temple of Asclepius. Sulla then sent out troops to punish the towns that sided with Mithridates, ignoring the treaty's amnesty terms. Sulla ordered the extortion of 20,000 talents, 10 times of what he demanded from Mithridates. Sulla practically destroyed Asia. He allowed his troops to carry out massacres. He himself raided temples and treasuries, despite his many speeches saying, quote, "Romans would never dream of indiscriminate slaughter or other acts of barbarism," end quote. So that's why Sulla went back to Italy and murdered thousands of innocent citizens. That also explains the killing of 1 million Gauls by Julius Caesar. But nope, the Romans would never act like barbarians. In 84 BC, Sulla left his officer Murena to stay in Phrygia with 2 legions. One must have imagined the state of mind Mithridates was in. He once ruled all of Asia and Greece, but he still had a formidable empire. On top of that, one thing was for sure. He was Mithridates' Eupator Dionysius the Great. He was the champion of liberty and the leader of light and truth. Mithridates was aware that the Roman Senate failed to ratify the peace at Dardanus. Murena was also aware of this. However, some territory around the Black Sea needed to be attended to. He recruited another large army and navy. Learning from his defeats in Greece, Mithridates got rid of the Hoplite formation. It was heavy and easily beaten by more flexible units. Mithridates himself created these smaller formations, sort of like the Roman legions, but not exactly. The units were less armored and they were smaller than Roman legions, easier to move around. They too carried javelins, just like the Roman ones. Mithridates increased the number of light skirmishers and archers in his army. Armenian and Persian knights were the centerpiece of his grand army. This army was now sent to the north of the Black Sea. They would quell the rebellions. The Colchians requested to be ruled by Mithridates' son, also named Mithridates. Yes, the same one that lost 6,000 cavalry in the First Mithridatic War. His son could no longer be trusted. He did send him to Colchis, but he killed him a little while later. Mithridates' paranoia rose. He thought about Archelaus next. Dorilaus did mention his thoughts about Archelaus' loyalty. What sealed the deal for Archelaus was that one of the things in the treaties said that he would receive 10,000 acres of land in Euboea. Archelaus got word that Mithridates was planning on killing him. He fled to Murena. Archelaus stoked the flames for the Second Mithridatic War. Murena began to raid Pontic territory. Mithridates held back though. He sent an envoy to Murena. Murena responded, "Treaty? What treaty? I've never seen a treaty document." Mithridates still held back. He sent an envoy to Rome. In 82 BC, Murena crossed the Halys River. In 81 BC, an envoy from Rome arrived. He ordered Murena to stop attacking Mithridates. Mithridates' spies reported that the envoy also agreed with Murena. There was no signed document. Murena attacked again. This time, there would be no holding back. Mithridates ordered Gordius to retaliate. The two armies met at the Halys River. Gordius held Murena in place. Mithridates arrived, and after charging Alexander-like into the Roman lines, the battle was won. Mithridates regained part of Cappadocia, along with his prestige. 2 full legions were gone. Murena fled back to Asia. Julius Caesar, yes, the same one I mentioned before, enlisted in the Roman army, and he won his first victory at Lesbos. he killed 500 soldiers allied to Mithridates. Sulla flew into a rage. His victory over Mithridates might not last. Sulla managed to get peace. Mithridates would marry his daughter Athenias to Ariobarzanes, and Mithridates would get another piece of Cappadocia. The kings held a party in Cappadocia. Mithridates went back to Pontus and lit a massive fire to thank Zeus and Mithra. Mithridates was actually named after Mithra, for those of you who don't know. Plutarch, in his own words, says, quote, "Like a wrestler ready for another bout, Mithridates has risen to his feet despite the blow Sulla had dealt to him." End quote. Do you remember the term Tet offensive effect? Well, if you don't, I will explain. In 1968, North Vietnam attacked American in South Vietnam. The offensive failed on a miserable scale, but the Americans and South Vietnamese troops were demoralized due to the determination of their enemy. Doesn't that sound oddly familiar? It's 'cause it is. Mithridates' war had failed, but he, quote, "went down in defeat before the greatest generals, only to rise again with more redoubtable for his losses." End quote. Cicero says it perfectly, quote, "Mithridates has done more by being defeated than if he had been victorious." End quote. Mithridates' indomitable spirit showed itself for the first time. He patched up his losses as if they never happened. Mithridates for almost a decade lived in complete peace. While he was living in complete peace, Sulla was ravaging Rome and caused many to flee. Some fled west to Sertorius, others fled east to Mithridates. They brought 6,000 troops and helped train Mithridates' soldiers. Mithridates' troops were no longer decorated with expensive gems, gold, and silver. His ships no longer had pools on their decks, and the silk canopies were gone. His army was now a real formidable force. He did fail to take some lands of the Achaeans, who were a tribe in the Caucasus. Mithridates sent officials to sign the peace at Dardanus, but once again his officials fell on deaf ears. I want to go back in time and talk about Archelaus. He's way more important than it seems. Archelaus had fought for Mithridates in Greece for years. He defected around 84 BC, until his last appearance was in 73 BC before the Third Mithridatic War, but his legacy and family lived on. His son, also named Archelaus, was appointed by Pompey the Great at the Temple of Comana. I had mentioned the temple in one of my previous episodes. In 56 BC, that same Archelaus became the husband of Berenike IV of Egypt, the sister of Cleopatra VII. When Ptolemy XII was restored, he promptly had Archelaus killed. It doesn't end there. The son of that second Archelaus was appointed as the Comana priest, and his son, also named Archelaus, was made king of Cappadocia. His daughter, Glaphyra, married two sons of Herod the Great, the same one from the Bible, and also of King Juba of Numidia, and her descendants included two kings of Armenia and a Roman consul. They were known for several more generations later. Archelaus, the commander of Mithridates, shows us just how long families lasted. From fighting in Greece, Archelaus brought his heritage all the way till Bible times, and longer. His great-great-grandkids would become rulers in the east, as well as Roman consuls in the west. It's really astounding when you think of it. Mithridates in his court was living the life of a king. No war, no trouble, no rebellion. Just the life of a really rich king. Mithridates would stage events, which often included poison, to enhance the look of being invincible. Mithridates would often try his poison on criminals condemned to death. He would also try it on himself. Here is a poem that fits Mithridates perfectly. There was a king, reigned in the east. There, when kings will sit to feast, they got their fill before they drink, with poison meat and poison drink. He gathered all that springs to birth, from the many venomed earth. First a little, thence to more, he sampled all her killing store. In easy smiling, seasoned sound, sat the king when heaths went round. They put arsenic in his meat, and stared aghast to watch him eat. They poured strychnine in his cup, and shook to see him drink it up. They shook, they stared, as white's their shirt. Them it was, their poison hurt. I tell the tale that I heard told. Mithridates, he died old. Mithridates Mithridatium. Mithridates had concocted an antidote called Mithridatium. This antidote lasted until the 1900s. Yes, the recent 1900s. But there are many questions about his Mithridatium. Like, how was it made? What was in it? What happened to it? Where did he keep it? Many more filter through our heads. Mithridates must have copied the works of other poison masters, like Attalus III, Nicander of Colophon. There are obviously more, but I'm not going to name all of them. Mithridates himself recorded hundreds of poisons, how they worked, how they are made. But it seems he never copied the work of his own antidote. Why is this? There are some plausible answers. Maybe he didn't want anyone to have it. That seems unlikely, though. He is the one that wanted to make the antidote for everybody. Of course, he might not have ever written it down. He could have kept it secret to himself. But again, this makes little to no sense. The papers for his Mithridatium were in his favorite castle, Canon Corion. The fact is that we will never know where it went or what happened to it, but we can piece together something of what it might have been. We can imagine his gardens and greenhouses. His medical team was impressive on its own. Crataeus, Pompeius, the Magi, the Agari shamans, and Timotheus were just some of the members. One of their concoctions was a paste held together by honey and turned into the size of an almond. Mithridates began each day by taking one of these with cold spring water. Apparently it never had any side effects and promoted Mithridates' immune system. After Mithridates' death, his library and papers were brought to Rome and translated. Pliny the Elder says, quote, "We know from direct evidence and by report that Mithridates was a more accomplished researcher into biology than any man before him. In order to become immune to poison by making his body accustomed to it, he alone devised the plan to drink poison every day, after first making his remedies." End quote. Mithridates, at his height of power, quote, "amassed detailed knowledge from all his subjects, who covered a substantial part of the world." End quote. Mithridates also may have worked with Zopyrus in Egypt, who shared his universal remedy, which consisted of 20 ingredients. Another helper was Asclepiades of Bithynia, who rejected Mithridates' invite to work in Sinope, but he did send him formulas for antidote. We know that Mithridates' Agari milked the steppe vipers in the Caucasus and used their venom for antidote and medicine. The key to Mithridates' poisons and antidotes was the combination of beneficial drug mixed with antitoxins and tiny amounts of poisons. Here are some of the myriad poisons: vipers, scorpions, jellyfish, the sap of the yew trees, and the crimson crystals of cinnabar. Pliny had discovered 7,000 venefic substances, all recorded in his encyclopedia. St. John's wort may have explained Mithridates' immunity to poison. If the herb is taken, it will help the liver produce enzyme, which will neutralize thousands of deadly poisons. The exact antidote will never be recovered. Many toxicologists have tried and failed to bring back to life the antidote that a man, more than 2,000 years ago, created. Little to no credit is given to Mithridates for his discovery. His grand antidote was destroyed by the Romans, just like how they destroyed the work of Attalus III. Rome did proclaim to have the secret antidote, but it was never kept alive and disappeared into history. In the end, Mithridates had over 65 ingredients in his Mithridatium. Mithridates' art and gem collection was stunning to say the least. Since he was a child, he loved to collect gems and rocks. He had a natural eye for beauty. He corresponded with the leading gemologist of the day, Zacchaeus, a Jew in Babylon. The Magi told athletes to wear red agates to become invincible. Zacchaeus recommended wearing a green jasper agate fleckled with red iron oxide to make one a convincing speaker. Mithridates would give his ambassadors rings out of agates to help them argue their case. Mithridates also loved his glyptics, which is engraving animals, mythic scenes, etc. onto intaglio sails and cameos. Like Alexander, Mithridates collected his own engraving team. He owned thousands of cups, plates, bowls, pitchers, all from the Rhodope Mountains, Crimea, and Colchis. Onyx and rock crystal came from Cappadocia. Some of Mithridates' art has survived. During the Crusade, the Venetians plundered Constantinople and dispersed some of Mithridates' art. One of Mithridates' finest pieces of art was a bronze crater. It was over 2 feet high, and it shows the skills of Mithridates' craftsmen. Eventually, it ended up in the hands of Nero. It was unearthed, and to this day is still in Rome. Doctors, pharmacologists, botanists joined the artists who flocked to Pontus, along with architects, scientists, and military engineers, like Niconides of Thessaly and Callimachus, who designed catapults and siege engines. Mithridates at a young age found beauty and defensive capability in Cabiria. In the area were maple, walnut, pine, and spruce trees. The Lycos River flowed through Cabiria. Cabiria was surrounded by forests and hills. This is where Mithridates founded Canon Corion. In this castle he placed his most valuable treasury and art. Most of his papers were here too. In 1912, the ruins for this castle were discovered, along with the underground staircase that survived. He also built his zoo here. Yes, zoo. He collected tons of animals from far-flung territory. There were ostriches, cobras, scorpions, crocodiles, pheasants, Bactrian camels, maybe even a tiger or elephant from India. Cabiria was also Mithridates' favorite hunting place. However, there was one thing that outdid all. That was the first water-powered mill. The massive waterfall in Cabiria inspired Mithridates to, quote, harness its power, end quote. And guess what? It worked. Then the Romans stumbled upon it and promptly destroyed it. The water-powered mill would not be constructed again until December 20th, 1790. So in this case, it was the Romans' fault. They basically halted society. During Mithridates' 9 years of peace, he strengthened his alliance with the pirates, and he sent money and troops to Sertorius in Spain. Sertorius was a military genius, to say the least. He owned all of Spain after fleeing from Rome, then got trapped in Mauritania, then went back to Spain, then rebelled, and started killing tons of Roman armies. Sertorius and Mithridates sent supplies to each other, but Sertorius also sent some generals, M. Varius, Lucius Magius, and Lucius Fanius. In 80 BC, Mithridates sent ambassadors to Rome again, hoping to sign the treaty, but Sulla had resigned his dictatorship and would die in 78 BC from worms eating his insides out. Mithridates complied with Sulla's last demand to leave Cappadocia. Mithridates looked east again to Tigranes, now the king of kings. Tigranes ruled from the mouth of Egypt to the Caspian Sea to Parthia. He had massive armies, chariots too. This time, he intended to succeed in Cappadocia. In 73 BC, Nicomedes died. Mithridates declared the Third Mithridatic War. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed. You can find me on Instagram at LoneBerserkerYT, and you can find my website at www.theriseoftheeast.com. Thank you all for watching. This has been the Rise of the East podcast.